Welcome everyone. Thank you for attending our first Guiding the Experience program. My name is Karen Reinhardt. I'm the curator at the Yellowstone Gateway Museum. Welcome also to our Zoom audience. This speaker series highlights the knowledge of area guides and acknowledges their roles in using resources wisely and educating the public. At certain times, perhaps during the presentation, and also after the program, there will be an opportunity for questions. For our Zoom audience, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and we'll ask as many of your questions as we can. Thank you for helping us keep these programs going with a donation. A special thank you to Rob Park for co-hosting this series, and to volunteer Scott Johnson for filming it, which makes it possible for folks at home to view via Zoom and later for our YouTube audience. The bathroom is up front through that door. And a reminder to please turn off your cell phones. Upcoming programs, so same time, same place, 7 p.m. on Wednesdays. October 26th, River Guide Norm Miller's program is Paddling Through Time, Experiences on Montana Rivers. November 2nd, Ski Guide Reed Youngbar, Beartooth Powder Guides, based in Cook City, gives a program titled What's Behind the Guided Experience? A ski guide's perspective of living and working in the Beartooth and Absaroka Mountains. On November 9th, so the final program, Dan Vermillion of the Sweetwater Travel Company gives a program titled Stories from a Fishing Guide on the Yellowstone River and Beyond. But tonight, Ken Sinay will be giving the program. He is a professional guide in Yellowstone and the surrounding ecosystem, work that he has enjoyed for more than 30 years. And he's done every kind of guiding possible. I'll let him tell you more about that. Ken created one of the first wildlife touring companies in Yellowstone and in Montana in 1990, designing an array of year-round outdoor experiences for people to view wildlife in secure and respectful formats. In 2020, he sold that business but formed a new business, Yellowstone Now, that specializes in river trips, wildlife observation, educational opportunities and programs, a variety of presentations, social media, wildlife and nature video productions, and more, helping people experience a shared natural heritage. Ken's bachelor's and graduate studies focused on wildlife biology and natural resource management. He has worked with resource management agencies, nonprofit conservation organizations, private industry, and wilderness outfitters. Ken has worked and lived in Park and Gallatin counties for over 30 years, hanging his hat in Livingston, Gardner, and Bozeman. Let's welcome Ken Sinay.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you all for being here. Thank everyone for having this event, and certainly the museum for sponsoring events like this. It's kind of nice to see some familiar faces. It's certainly nice to be here. And I can't think of a better place to have this, so thank you for the forum as well. It's absolutely spectacular, frankly, to be doing something like this. I'm going to jump right into it. We're only here for about an hour or so, and I'd like to get into a number of different subjects along the way. And as Karen said, we're going to try to stop for questions midway through this little event. I have been guiding for a long time. I first started guiding in Yellowstone in 1989, and it's kind of interesting that in that year I guided ski tours in association with the Nature Conservancy 1 year after the big fire. So I wasn't even in Yellowstone on a routine basis prior to 1989. And then also in 1989 I started working for a horsepack outfitter guiding hunting trips inside the Bob Marshall. But if we can, what I'd like to do right now is show a very short little video, and it might just give you an idea, an impression of the type of guiding or my interpretive or guiding style. So I'm just going to hold off for just a little minute. We're going to run this. It's going to take about 4 minutes. This is a river trip, if you can't tell. was a beaver that just splashed in the background. You're not hearing this, but I'm talking about the beaver and the ecosystem and the characteristics of the river, particularly at that location. Multiple channels creates multiple habitat for a lot of these riparian species. I hadn't intended on speaking over this, but I'm going to do that for a little bit because we don't have a lot of audio here. Literally, I take the boat into side channels. It's a custom-built boat. We'll take a look at the whole boat in a little bit. I can modify the boat depending on how many people are with me. Little whitetail buck. By going into these backwater channels, we're literally exploring parts of the river, and this happens to be the Madison River, by the way. We're exploring parts of the river that very few people ever access. First of all, you need a boat. Second of all, you have to try to do this. So many people just get in their canoe, their kayak, their raft, and they just go downstream. But in my case, I'm focusing on the wildlife, as well as the plant communities. And then I'll blend it with aspects of cultural history. This is all shot on that day. We had 4 beaver sightings that day. Pelicans in the background here. It happens that what I'm doing is I'm describing to the people with me, the person with me, excuse me, who's just a cameraman, I'm actually describing to him what I intend to do. And that's something that I typically do when I'm guiding as well. I'm trying to let the people have an idea of what my motivation is, and where I'm going, what I'm looking for, so that they become more a part of that experience. Some common mergansers in the back. Of course, that was just a great blue heron. And then we happen to get this moose.
Wow, yeah.
The guy with the camera was flipping out. But he kept at it, the greater yellow legs. And I think we can go ahead and stop that now. Thank you very much. That was about perfect. That was about perfect. I'm going to advance to another slide here. You know, the point of the once in a lifetime literally is that, oops, wrong way. Once in a lifetime is that these are once in a lifetime experiences. So I don't care how many times I float that river. I could have floated it 5 days in a row. I could have floated at the same time of year 5 years in a row, and I might see another moose. But it will never be exactly that type of experience. Of course, different weather, and I'm with different people. But the fact of the matter is, you never duplicate an outdoor experience. Every single day outdoors is unique. And this is one of the reasons it's so much fun to do this type of thing. Very quickly, I have done a lot of different types of guiding, and so I'm going to run through it. Just a couple different things. That's the boat. The boat it's a custom-built boat, and I can carry up to 6 other people in the boat. It's a pretty heavy boat. I'm getting older. It's a little harder to do, but everybody's pretty comfortable. And the gentleman on the left, it happens to be looking at a map that's associated with the journey of Lewis and Clark. So this is one of the publications that came out of the bicentennial celebration. And so literally, typical, happens to be a German man. That's my wife in the back rear corner with the sunglasses on, Susie Holtzmeyer Sinay. We'll see her again in this presentation. And the fact of the matter is, he's a guy who wants to know the details. So he was right on it. Even before we took off, he's already reviewing the information we're gathering. Of course, the woman in the far rear by the flag, and that happens to be a flag. A lot of you folks probably know this stuff. That's a flag from the American Fur Company. That's the flag that flew over Fort Union at the junction of the Yellowstone and the Missouri River. It's really, so I'm trying to put together a whole bunch of different aspects to make a complete cultural as well as natural experience. Susie still does the llama treks. She owns Yellowstone llamas, And with the llamas, you're dealing with many different groups of people, many different ages. She's got her own programs going on. She specifically told me, don't talk about them too much, because I'm going to want to talk about them someday, so we're not going to talk about them too much. But the fact of the matter is, it's a great experience. Horses aren't for everybody. Backpacking isn't for everybody. Llama trekking fits right there in the middle. And just to give her a little sales pitch, she happens to be doing these right now. It's 2-hour hikes out of Sage Lodge, and she does day hikes in Yellowstone as well. We serve a lot of people. I say we because I'm never doing these kinds of things now. Yellowstone now is my own independent thing. A guy's got to do something after he sells the business, right? So what do? You start another business. But I can do it at my own pace. And it's amazing, by the way, how many times kids as well as adults will pick up that antler that you find on the ground and put it on their head like this. I'm just shocked at how many times that people always routinely want to do this, and then we'll go ahead and take some trophy photos with it as well. We'll talk more about trophy photos in a little bit. But serving all ages. I'm going to talk about hunting guiding as well as wildlife viewing guiding. And the hunting guiding, of course, you're not dealing with as many families. You're dealing with more individuals. And there's a broad difference between those two types of guiding. And I have to put up an image like this. The map is labeled Greater Yellowstone Land Ownership, but all I really want to indicate, and we'll look at a different one a little later on, all I want to really indicate is the magnitude of this landscape. Yellowstone now, my new endeavor, is going to explore the entire ecosystem, and that's kind of the point. When I use the word Yellowstone in many cases, I'm referring to the entire ecosystem. I don't want to have to say that all the time, or the greater Yellowstone area, if you will, which is more accurate when we're talking about the towns and the communities surrounding it. And of course, we're in one of those right now. This has been going on for the length of time of the history of Yellowstone National Park, but also culturally for thousands of years before that. And quite frankly, the recognition of Yellowstone as being 150 years old this year, and the emphasis on the Native American history, the First Peoples history, we have never approached this, we as a culture, have never approached this subject and embraced that aspect of the cultural history of this region as much as we are right now. So this is a change. We will always have change. And the fact of the matter is, it's a constant. Change is a constant. Things are going to change again. And I'm probably going to bring that up again as I go through this little presentation. But the fact of the matter is, there are many, many more opportunities for guiding, and many which have never yet been explored. So this interest in Native American culture inside Yellowstone is almost certainly going to bring more attention to Native American culture outside of Yellowstone. These are great opportunities. These are changing values. These are increases in recognition of people and place, as well as ultimately the ecosystem as well. So all these things go together. I think of it as an ecology of tourism, as an ecology of business and economy, as an ecology of community. I don't go down to Jackson very often. I used to guide down there quite a bit as I'm going through Grand Teton. I certainly don't go to Ashton, Idaho very often. But the fact of the matter is, we're all in this together. And I'm hoping with Yellowstone Now to explore all of that during my remaining time on Earth, to explore all of that and to ultimately try to some extent to bring us all together and bring more attention to other aspects of this incredible area that we live inside of. Where am I going? Let's keep on going with this. And you can't understand the ecosystem without covering the cultural history. You can't understand wildlife without exploring the cultural, at least trying to understand the cultural history of the region. And I sincerely mean that. As I drive over Bozeman Pass, I came from Bozeman this afternoon. As I drive over the pass and I drive down into this valley, I can't help but think of the trail that William Clark followed, and the fact that he's following a buffalo trail, and the fact that the natives who were here prior to the Lewis and Clark expedition, prior to the Euro-American invasion, that they followed the same trail. It cannot be ignored. And I constantly just try to, and I can't, but I try to imagine the thousands of bison on that landscape. When Clark gets to the Yellowstone, as I'm sure some of you are aware, those guys on the expedition are overjoyed because they know they're not going to be hungry anymore. They know they're going to continue to have bison and other wildlife throughout the expedition. This is a small detail, by the way, of William Clark's map of 1810. How many people here are familiar with this map? Is there anyone who's seen William Clark's map of 1810? Very good, very good. This is a couple of people, and I appreciate that. This is just a small portion of that. And I may be a little off subject here, but I want to point out a couple of things. If you look right in that central area where you can see some lettering, Coulter's route in 1807. So as I'm sure, people who haven't even seen this map, I'm sure there's some folks who are aware of the fact that John Coulter came through some part of what is now Yellowstone National Park in that winter, 1807 to 1808. And this shows that portion. So in a sense, the reason I selected this image is because it's the same image that we just looked at a little bit ago. So the other one is more political, the other one is more contemporary, but this covers that same landscape. And this map was drawn by hand by William Clark, sent to London, and then in London an engraver took Clark's hand-drawn map, that was in 1810, and created something that was a little more stylized. And this map was published in 1814, but it's still referred to as Clark's map of 1810 because that's when he put together the components. And it's a truly incredible map. If you ever have a chance to look at that map, you can see it online, though there'll be portions of it that are not so easy to see on a desktop computer screen. So I did just want to bring that up. This has been going on for a long time, and we really have an incredible opportunity to know this place in detail. When it comes to wildlife watching, and I almost selected a slide where we could see the cars on the shoulder of the road inside Yellowstone National Park, where you have like 20 cars and 60 people standing on the shoulder of the road with their spotting scopes handy watching bears and wolves. But I just wanted to show something a little bit different. This image is taken from a backcountry area. We were actually doing a backpack trip, and we were looking at bighorn sheep at that moment. This is years ago. But in all cases, I'm the guy who's carrying a tripod and a spotting scope nowadays. Sometimes I'm guiding someone who's carrying a rifle. But the fact of the matter is, things have changed. Every time I'm on a hike with someone, and I'm carrying that tripod in the crook of my arm and the spotting scope attached and my binoculars on my chest, I can't help but think about those early mountain men and explorers who are constantly carrying their muzzle loaders as they're going through the mountains. Obviously, things have changed. We're not trying to shoot every bear, as the members of the Lewis and Clark expedition seemed to do whenever they saw a bear. We're trying to just see them. But at that time, that's pretty much what they did. They tried to shoot pretty much every bear that they could see. So things truly, truly have changed. And of course, you're all aware that wolves are a big draw for this local area, as are bears as well. In the case of the wolves, and I want to point out two different things. I'm going to have to look and see my statistics here, but right now in Montana, it was just in an article yesterday, as a matter of fact, the value of hunting per year to the state of Montana, to all hunting, not just guided hunting, $138 million a year. That's for the state of Montana. Wolves in 2005 was estimated at $35 million in 2005. Recent estimate is $83 million a year as to the value of wolves for all of the greater Yellowstone area. So two different areas, but I just want to emphasize, we don't need to get too specific on this, we're talking tens of millions of dollars in value. When I talk about doing something like that out there on a river outside the park, that's a smaller market. The national park is the draw, but we have people who've been doing things like hunting for over 100 years, commercially, literally, being paid for it. With things like wildlife watching, this is a growth. It is growing so fast on a national and global level, it's astonishing. Now, of course, Lots of things in our economy have an impact on this. So I don't really know where it's going to go in the future, but I know people are going to want to do it. They're going to continue to want to see wildlife. When it comes to hunters, hunters come with the goal, so to speak, of killing an animal, of taking possession of it. But when they're out there in the field, it really is more of a thorough experience. It's more of an intimate experience. And what could be more intimate than literally the violent act of killing an animal and being able to touch it? So when wildlife watchers don't touch it, they're just looking at it. But if they ever have a chance to touch something, they want to, and sometimes they try too hard. I think we've all heard of that. But that could be extremely dangerous. But in this gentleman's case, I do want to point out this fellow. I'm going to try to share some interesting stories with you. This fellow actually bid for a commercial hunt. There's a fellow I was guiding. He bid on a commercial hunt in somewhere back east, the old country, Minnesota, Michigan, something like that. It was a convention of the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. And he won. He was the successful bidder. So he really did want to harvest an elk. And of course, I worked with him very hard on that. We had 3 opportunities in one day, none of which ultimately panned out. But these are extremely intimate and exciting events. And he and I, if you're with the right guide and you're the right hunter, it doesn't happen with everybody, but it does happen a lot. He and I were like a team. We were working together. And so we just barely missed out on 3 opportunities and continued hiking off into the mountains. And then ultimately we found 2 elk that we had actually been tracking. And he had them within range, a little bit far. He seemed very competent. I would not discourage him from shooting. I have to let him decide to do that. It's his permit. But at the same time, I'm taking off my backpack, I'm setting up a rest, I'm range finding this, I'm telling him how far away it is, I'm looking at it with binoculars, and I'm telling him when, what they're doing and whether he's going to have a good shot. He's looking through the scope on his rifle. He's not disagreeing with me. He's looking for the opportunity. And ultimately, these elk were bedded, they stood, they turned sideways and walked over the hill, and he never got his shot. In fact, he almost did. But he was a good hunter. He had good values. There were always some sticks in front of the vital zone of the elk. And I'm not talking about teeny tiny sticks. I'm talking about something that would easily deflect or destroy his opportunity. He wanted to make a good shot. So he's being a very responsible individual. That I have to give the guy a lot of credit for that. Now he did. He had 2 goals. One was to harvest an elk. The other was to see a grizzly bear. And he did see the grizzly bear. We were on that hill. We looked off the other side, and he's looking down. It's great when the client actually sees this, because in a sense, he gets to claim the coup. He gets to claim the credit for it. And he's looking down, and he said, I see something down below us. And he spotted a sow with a cub. And the interesting thing about this is, ultimately, he sees the sow and the cub, and it takes a while for me to figure this out. But that bear scented us. And she was over 300, maybe 500 yards away. But she moved away because of us, even though we were not aware of it and we were not close to her. But it took me a while to figure that out. And as we had approached that little hill, I saw ravens on a tiny gut pile from other hunters from previous days. She was there because of the gut pile, most of which had been consumed, which that's why she was there. She wanted to eat that, and she did. And then we disturbed her, and she moved away. I want to show you something else. This is the trophy photo. What happens when you're guiding hunters, the trophy photo becomes as important as the animal itself for some hunters. It's kind of a strange thing. I do not like publicizing photos like this. I hunt, I post no photos like this of myself anywhere. To me, it's disrespectful of the animal. And respect for the animal is very, very important. But the photo is very important to the hunter. There is no doubt about that. He wants the memory. This is intended to be a respectful photo of the deer. Hunting and killing an animal is always a violent act. If I can't talk about it in Montana, where can I talk about it, right? And ultimately, the contrast between wildlife viewing and hunting, these 2 segments of our population, sometimes people do both, but not everybody. Some wildlife watching guides hunt. I'd say the majority of them that I know actually do, but not all of them. Not all of them do. The goal is to have respect for those animals no matter what you're doing. And that is one of the most difficult things about the hunting guiding. That is the trophy photo from the wildlife watcher. That's Susie again, Susie Holtzmeyer Sinay. And that's a trophy photo of a skull that we found inside Yellowstone National Park. In both cases, this is a memory for those people of that once-in-a-lifetime experience. It really does contribute to that. And of course, there's that opening shot. The same thing with something like this. I don't call this a trophy photo per se, but to have an intimate experience with the landscape, with the animal, and an illustration like this somewhat shows that. There's a high elevation, subalpine area. It's actually up Dunraven Pass, for those of you who are familiar with it, inside Yellowstone National Park. To see a bear, statistically, is still the primary animal people want to see when they come to Yellowstone. Wolves right now, as far as I know, number 2. It took a long time for wolves to make it to number 2. How did they make it to number 2? Familiarity. It's in the news. It gets in the news. We market these experiences. We market these opportunities, we as a culture, as a population, as an economy, and then the people start to come. It really is an interesting thing. So when we have new services or new products that we want to make available for people, perhaps visiting Native American reservations, Indian reservations here in Montana, or perhaps doing a river trip, all of which will occur outside Yellowstone National Park. That is much more difficult to create because there's fewer people offering it, and you have to build the product, build the service, and then you have to get people to be familiar with it. But that is the hope for the future. I want to show this too, and the same thing happens to some extent with the hunters. Now I'm going to have to take a look at this. It's not obvious in this illustration. In fact, it's much less obvious than I thought it would be, but I knew that might happen. All the way over here on this illustration, right there, is a tiny dot of orange. I want to talk a little bit about guiding these guys. So typically, for most hunting operators, most hunting outfitters, 1 guide to 2 hunters. I happen to guide, I never did introduce it, I happen to guide for the Sturmitz Ranch. Anybody familiar with the Sturmitz family? Perfect, excellent, thank you. So Rob and Stacy Sturmitz, they're running the operation, Wilderness Connections, in Cinnabar Basin. I think of Cinnabar Basin as this remote, incredibly beautiful valley north and a little bit west of Gardner, Montana. And it's just spectacularly beautiful. And it's a wonderful place to be able to travel and hunt and just simply hike the landscape, and I'll be starting to do that again this Saturday. I've been going out there for about 25 or 26 years. I think I know the ranch a little bit. But you take out 2 hunters, and we often put them on a stand. This is not always stalk and walk and find something and then try to get close. That's what I was doing with the other guy who was on the hilltop. In this guy's case, and it could be the same guy for all I care, because you always wind up starting out the day in a situation like this. You hike out to a place, I plunk the guy down, I put myself in a different position so I can see a different piece of landscape. And while I'm watching that different piece of landscape, this guy's freezing his tail off in a stand. And I have to give these guys some credit. A lot of these guys are eastern whitetail hunters. They sit in a tree stand. I don't know how the heck they do it. They're not hiking, but they're freezing their buns off up there on a mountainside. And they just, I tell them, you stay right here. Don't go anywhere. Stay right here. I want to know where you are, and this is a good spot to be. And it works. I mean, we've been doing it for decades. It does work. Animals use the landscape in a certain way. And that's one of the nice things for a guide. One of the advantages of being a guide is you learn that landscape extremely well. I don't go to the Bahamas. I don't go to Mexico. I don't go to Europe. I go here. Everything I do here. It's good enough for me, apparently. And to learn one place extremely well, what could be better than Greater Yellowstone, or even Yellowstone National Park? I could be satisfied my whole life if I were just in Yellowstone National Park, but I live and work in a much larger landscape than that. And that is that guy's experience. If a deer or an elk doesn't walk along, that's the only things we're hunting here, deer and elk. If they don't come along, well, you just had a beautiful day. And it's astonishing how many of those guys are having a good time doing that. They do want to harvest an animal, there's no doubt about it, and in many cases they're spending thousands of dollars to do this. The hunt, but also the transportation, the cost of being out here, the time off work, those types of things. But it does help them have their intimate experience with the natural world. And that is their way of doing that. In many cases, these are guys, they may be executives, they may be farmers in Pennsylvania. I'm actually thinking of particular people that I know. They may be doctors or attorneys from California or New York City. But the fact of the matter is, some of them are even good people. And the fact of the matter is, this is their connection, their bond with the natural world, as opposed to, say, the wolf watchers who are standing on roadside and watching those wolves. That is their bond with the natural world. We're all doing this to have those unique wildlife experiences, those unique nature-based experiences. And once you see an animal in a certain location, it's almost as if we expect it to happen again. So we always look back at that same spot. All of us do this. And so experience counts. The more you see something at a location, the more you see something, the more you go out and do this, the more you see animals in different locations, and then you bond with those locations. Your psyche is glued into those locations, and you'll always look back at the top of that rock for a fox lying down on top of that boulder. Now, I've never seen another fox on top of that boulder. I've been guiding for 32 years in Yellowstone National Park. I've never seen another fox on that boulder. But I've seen a couple of coyotes. so it pays off. And then you also realize, it helps you build confidence that these animals can occur. That is some of what I want to transfer to these people who go out into the field with me. I want them to know that they can do this, that they can find these things back at home, that they can learn how to do this at home and build those skills themselves. Now, believe it or not, I'm actually closing in on the end of my slides, which is not a problem. I can talk. But I wanted to show this map of the whole area again. And the reason I do is because there are places on this map, and I don't know where they are, where you can have unique, routine wildlife experiences. Because animals are habitual, as we are, about where they spend certain times of year, where they spend certain seasons, where they perform certain behaviors. And we can take full advantage of that. If we don't look, we don't see. And I want us all to see that kind of stuff. I would like to get into some more story stuff, and I think this is actually my last slide. But we're doing this for everybody. Again, the hunting thing, I've taken out fathers and sons and helped them share the experience. The son is successful, the father's happy, they bond, they share the experience. Particularly a dad, for example, who's lost the physical ability to climb the mountains anymore. And now his son is able to do it, and I'm able to guide that son. It's a wonderful thing to be part of the family. It's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful opportunity. It's a wonderful privilege. It's a great privilege to be able to guide on these public lands, or for that matter, even on private lands. For example, when I'm floating on a river through private lands, as I was in that video right at the beginning. Private land, public resource, public way to access it, and to fully take advantage of it. In the future, I'm actually hoping that in the future we have opportunities for private landowners to benefit even more. There's not necessarily, I have no problem with them actually earning cash for these opportunities, but I also think I hope that there will be opportunities for public entities or nonprofits to fund private landowners to manage more appropriately for wildlife, to promote these types of experiences, as well as stability of the landscape itself. We all know we've got lots of problems with weeds, for example. I think weed control is a wonderful opportunity for other entities to help private landowners to overcome weed issues. So just for the heck of it, I'm kind of curious. I don't even know how long I went. Sometimes I go pretty fast. Where are we on time right now? Do we have any opportunities for questions, or do we have anyone who has any questions? Wake up, folks. If you don't, I'm going to give you some. I'm going to give you some answers.
I
ahead.
have a question.
Sure.
So of all the wildlife experiences that you've had, is there one particular, I guess, sighting or experience that, if you had to sort it all out and say, this was the most unusual thing I've seen, what was that?
That's a great question, and it's a wonderful question coming from people who are local, by the way, because I know you've had great experiences. There's two questions I get a lot. One is, what's my favorite animal? I don't have a favorite animal. I think they're all lovely. I think they're all wonderful. There's no doubt about it. To see a bear is a great thing. To see a grizzly bear is a great thing. I was a young college student. I wondered, this was back when the Craigheads were doing their work. It was very controversial. What was going to happen to the grizzly bear? Grizzly bear was just put on the endangered species list, National Geographic articles, and in fact, I think it was that National Geographic article that clued me in on what was going in Yellowstone. And I was in my 20s in Arizona, Tucson, Arizona. I wondered if I would ever even get up here. So it's great to see those dramatic and rare species. I have seen a wolverine just once. I have had a number of mountain lion sightings. So to me, they're all great. I think the one, I'm going to address your question though before I'm done with an experience, but with two experiences, frankly. But all of them, they all really do, they all count. There's nothing that's special about a particular species. The first thing we want to do is see an animal. The second thing that people tend to want to do is see an animal do something. You know, a sleeping buffalo is not as cool as a buffalo that's walking, or for that matter, chasing away another bull. The third thing we want to do is see species interact. So number one, see a species, see an animal. Number two, see it do something. Third thing, see it interact with a member of the same species or another species. So those are two of them that that's one thing I really like to emphasize. And those things can make a great experience. So let's address an actual experience. Common species. This involves a garter snake and a red-tailed hawk. I'm with a family inside Yellowstone National Park. I'm sure we'd been looking for wolves and bears like crazy, and maybe we'd even seen them. But we stopped for lunch. I've got a little boy sitting alongside of me. He's like 8 or 9 years old. Both of us have our back up against one of these big glacial boulders, and we're sitting by a place called Junction View, right near the Tower Junction area. And we're just sitting there, we're having our sandwiches. And the parents are somewhere over there. They can't sit on the ground. They're going to sit on a rock, you know. And so we're sitting on the ground right alongside each other. And darned if this red-tailed hawk doesn't come flying on over, and it lands on a boulder right about where the top of that speaker is. Just lands right on top of there. It's only like 5 yards away. It just lands right on top of the boulder. And I'm looking at the kid and go, hey, check it out, red-tailed hawk. You know, we both probably saw it at exactly the same time. And as soon as we both look at it, that hawk drops off the boulder, goes into the grass, grabs a garter snake, and goes right back to the top of the boulder. The snake is doing this. The snake is just waving around like crazy. And that hawk starts going wham, 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 right on the head of that garter snake, and then it takes it and flies away. And the body of the snake is still doing it.
Wow.
I don't remember the child's name. I don't remember the family. But I know he remembers that experience, and so do I. That was so dramatic, it was incredible.
Oh, that's awesome.
Now, I'm going to tell you, I had another one in mind. I'll tell you another one. I'll tell you a big grizzly bear experience. And you guys some of you have probably seen this kind of stuff. But this is the kind of story that can really impress on people the cognizance, the consciousness, the personality, so to speak, of animals. But we're up on Dunraven Pass. There had been a sow up there with 2 little cubs. Sow grizzly bear with 2 cubs, right out in the open. She'd been up there, I'd seen her. Some days you see her, some days you don't. We go on up there. There's a lone tree on the mountainside. And she's at the bottom of that tree with those 2 cubs. And everybody's just kind of all curled up in a ball. And she's just laying down there, and she'd probably already nursed them, and everybody's just resting. And the cubs, one of the cubs gets up and starts walking around the tree. And it walks around the tree, and it gets to the other side of the tree, circles all the way around the tree, takes its paw and whacks its mother on the butt. And the mother stands up, and she spins around, and the cub runs around the tree and whacks her on the butt from the other side. And she spins around, and the cub runs around the tree, whacks her on the butt. She spins around, and this time she turned around, the cub ran nose to nose. I mean, the cub is playing with the mom, and the mom is playing with the cub. I mean, this is amazing. I'm going to tell you another one, just because these are the ones that really, you never forget them. And I never remember who I was with.
Yeah.
I remember the animal. I don't remember the person. Another one was, and then maybe I'll tell you a hunting story, I'm up there, I'm in Yellowstone, common, classic, I'm with more people. I mean, I would guide in Yellowstone for 11 months out of the year, and then I guide hunters for 1 month, roughly. So I've got more of those kinds of stories, I'm sure. But in any case, we're near Tower Junction again, and we're looking down into a region of the Yellowstone River called the Narrows. And there's this, it's the place where the big basalt cliffs are, which I'm sure many of you have seen those. You stop on the road, there's a pullout, you can look down from that location, and there's some broken basalt, little cliffy areas and outcrops down below. Traffic is going by behind me, and we're at the pullout, and I've got these people who are looking at the view, and I'm looking for bighorn sheep and eagles and hawks and whatever else is out there. And as we're standing there, this black bear sow with two little cubs comes walking up on this rocky outcrop, and there's a little worn out basin right there. And she lays down and she puts her back against the outcrop, a little kind of sort of a jutting outcrop, and the cubs climb up on her chest and start to nurse. I'm standing there with these folks, and we're standing right there, and she's maybe, 100 yards away, pretty close. You can see all this with binoculars very, very well. And she starts to nuzzle those cubs with her nose as they're suckling. And then she takes a paw and she puts it around them. And then she takes the other paw and she starts to stroke them.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And you're watching this, and it's like, holy smokes.
Wow.
Now, I've seen a lot of black bears. And I've even seen black bears nurse quite a bit. But I've never seen it like that. And I'll never see that again. I just know I won't. I'm trying to maximize these opportunities for myself too. And that's one of the great things about being a guide, is being able to share it. On one end, yeah, I think all guides are probably a little bit type A. They like to be in control. They like to be the guy who's going to get paid attention to. I got the car keys, that kind of thing. And there's also that with the hunting. But it really is wonderful to be able to share these things. And again, it's a privilege to be able to operate on our public lands. It's a privilege to be able to serve people in this forum, in this format, and share with them the things that I believe I know, and to make new discoveries at the same time for myself. I'm not taking pictures. I'm working for them. I'm paying attention to them. They're who I'm serving, but I get to come along for the ride. I get to facilitate. This is what a guide does. A guide facilitates. All guides provide four things: special knowledge, special skills, special equipment, and some measure of security. The security of the one's the most difficult one, but of course safety is a priority, right? And if they do something really foolish, but the fact of the matter is, those four things: knowledge, skill, equipment, security. And the more of those things that I can provide, in a way it's better. Some of those are very detailed. Details matter, details count. Okay, some guides want to provide a really nice picnic. I like to do that. I like to have picnics. So, we would put a lot of attention into our picnics. I don't know if I'm going to keep doing that. I probably will. But it completes an experience. And as I said, when I was with that boy, that picnic turned into a dramatic time. I'm going to tell you another one, because now we're starting the hunting season. Well, we already did. We've had the archery season. We've had a couple of negative bear encounters already. Some that in the past year, there's been some that have been truly tragic. I don't want to go there very much at all. But I have to admit, every time I'm doing the hunting guiding, and I'm doing it in grizzly bear country, it's on my mind. It's on my mind all the time. I think that when I start the season, and I'm just talking about me now, when I start the season, I might even be a little bit paranoid. I'm definitely cautious. I start it with trepidation. I'm concerned about grizz. And that makes sense to some extent, because you're just going bam, right out there into the mountains, and there haven't been nearly as many people there yet. And bears will become, again, they're habitual. They're going to some of the same areas year after year, looking for the same food sources. And now the firearm season starts, and pretty soon there's going to be gut piles, so they may even come in, even if they hadn't been there prior. But if they're already there, that's a greater opportunity to accidentally bump into them. They're using the same trails we are. There was one season some years ago where we weren't seeing much in the way of elk. And I had spotted a big bull way the heck up there. And the hunters love to hear that kind of stuff, of course. Big bull up on the ridge, way up there at Grizzly Meadows. And so we go on out there, and I literally said to some of the other guides, I said, listen guys, I don't want to go up there by myself. Nobody's been up there. And if we get something, it's going to take a lot more work. And there could be a bear up there. So 2 guides, 2 hunters,
And we bust our buns to get up into this high country. I mean, literally, we were subalpine. We get up into this tiny little meadow, and as we get up into the meadow, there's two things I'm going to share with you here. One is about the animals. As we enter the meadow, and I and the other guide are in front, as you can always imagine, type A personalities. These guys want to be in control, the guides want to be in control, the hunters are behind us. And that's a safer way to do it, frankly. If there's a bear, I want to be in the front. I want to deal with this. I don't want this guy up there, because I'm assuming he's naive. And many of the hunters can be very, very naive. Many of the watchers can be very naive as well, the wildlife watchers. We enter the meadow, and lo and behold, as soon as we enter this meadow, two wolves come trotting across the meadow, from the backside of the meadow, trotting across. The other guide is like, wow, wolves! He thought it was so cool. This is the kind of guy who sometimes downplays wolves, trash talks wolves, doesn't like wolves. I think it's cool, you know? And all of a sudden he thinks it's cool. So these two wolves go by, and we continue into the meadow, and then 5 more come out. We go to the spot where the wolves came from, and we get up on top of this, we go where they had been bedded, and there's footprints all over in wolf beds and such, and we have our lunch. We look off the backside, there's 1.5 feet of snow around, the wind is howling, you're hunting. I mean, this is in the mountains. And we start our way back down. And as we're going back down, of course, you're in high country now. Now you can glass a lot more landscape with your binoculars. You can really check a lot more landscape out. And so we're doing this a lot, but it's very, very steep. We're coming back in a different direction. It's not as easy to traverse. And we literally are traversing a very, very steep mountainside. Now it happens, the other guide is in the front, and I'm right behind him. He was younger than me. And so when he's younger than me, he can go a little faster. How are we doing? Are we okay on time, guys?
Yes.
Great, okay. So he's a little faster, and he's a typical 21-year-old kid, and it's his first year actually formally guiding. He's got a 9mm pistol on his hip. He's in front of me. He's not even carrying pepper spray.
Oh, gosh.
I've got 2, right? And so, I mean, this is how I travel, especially during the hunting season. And so he's right in front of me, and we're traversing the hillside, and all of a sudden, he steps backward, and he says, "Grizzly bear." I want to tell you how fast a person can think. In my mind is, if he has time to say the word grizzly, it's not here yet. But I immediately step forward, he steps back, he's right alongside of me. I pull the pepper spray, got the safety off. He has the handgun up, tiny little pea shooter really compared to a grizz. And I'm saying, don't shoot, it's okay, bear, it's okay, bear. I happened to guide one of the hunters who was with me during that event last year. And he went through the whole thing with me the way he remembered it. He said, "You were talking to that bear." And I'm saying, "It's okay, bear, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay." I'm standing like this, the other guy's standing like this, and the bear comes towards us with a woof, turns at 90 degrees, and lopes up the hill.
Nice.
And I want to tell you something. There's 2 things going on there. And by the way everybody responded was, that's a whole separate story. Because everybody was like totally upset, major adrenaline rush, and then we're all calming down. Then we go down the hill, and then everybody gets giddy. And they all start yakking about it, you know. And I'm just quiet, listening to them. I'm keeping my eyes on we're hunting elk, and, you know, I'm watching out for another bear. I mean, it really did happen. And every time I told that story, even as I tell you now, I feel my adrenaline rise. I feel my pulse rate go up. I mean, it could have been a very, very bad experience. I made a good decision, 2 really good decisions in retrospect. I carry a big day pack. The other guy was making fun of me. I carry a full first aid kit. Had anything happened, I would have at least been partly prepared. The second thing is, I already lost my train of thought on that one, but the other thing is, about those animals, those bears were up there, the bear was up there, and the wolves were up there to avoid the hunters. I am convinced of that. So in other words, had there been a shot, had there been a sense of a carcass down below, that bear could go right down there. The wolves could go right down there. The wolves and the bear were so close together, they were within 300 yards of each other, and there was no carcass up there. Why are they all up there? They're up there because all of a sudden hunters have inundated the valley, and they can come down at night. It's as simple as that. And when I say things like that, and I've just, you know, I'm writing some little articles down, the magazine Outside Bozeman, and there's a seasonal thing that I'm writing that deals with being aware in the natural world. And to do that, I've been reading some other people's books associated with tracking and sound and bird song. And when you eventually investigate this stuff, while you're trying to figure it out, when you're not aware of it, it seems so difficult. It's like, how come I didn't know that particular track? How did I not know that track pattern? How did I not know that song? But once you know it, it's like second nature. It's so simple. Most of it is actually just, most of understanding the natural world is common sense. When you think about it, it's actually very, very simple. The problem is that we're in this room. The problem is that we live in these houses. The problem is that we live with all these trappings of contemporary civilization all around us. And we're inundated with this stuff, and we cut ourselves off from the natural world. One of the things I think about constantly is, well, gee, what was it like for the Native Americans when they're living in their villages all winter long? What are the wolves really doing? What are they really doing in relation to the grizzly bears when the bears come out of hibernation? How did they modify their daily behavior when that's going on? Or did the camp dogs just keep the bears and the wolves away? Or do the camp dogs just definitely chase the bears away, even keep them further away? And what happens when you go hunting and you kill something? Does the bear just come right to the carcass? There's a lot of things that have been written about this. So some of you probably even have some answers for that. But there's so much going on there in day-to-day living that this is some of what we ourselves, it's not a bad idea to think about it, and then think about it when you're in the field, when you go for a walk. And believe it or not, a lot of this happens right around town. So in our own interaction with the natural world, we can get a lot of these things. And yes, I'm talking about ravens on downtown Livingston. I'm talking about crows in downtown Livingston. I'm talking about the fox on the edge of town. I'm talking about the squirrel in the park. Yes, those things can clue us in to other species as well. I find that I'm often looking at sidewalks to see kitty cat tracks and watch what those kitty cats are doing, and to see dog tracks to learn the gaits of canids in the wild. So that's just some of it that's there. And if you'd like, I actually have some other stories in mind. I may think of other specific things that I'd like to share with you that deal with subjects. But once again, any questions from anybody present or online right now? Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Have you seen, lately with the increased attendance in Yellowstone has just grown so much, and social media has risen in the last 15 years. Before this, when you were guiding, have you seen the challenges that have occurred with guiding in Yellowstone with more people?
That's a great question. And one of the aspects of guiding, when you're doing in the wildlife watching, which most of it is happening in Yellowstone. There's not a lot of guiding happening outside Yellowstone. That's always been a big goal of mine, is to promote appreciation for wildlife resources outside the park, which is why I do the river stuff, by the way. It's a great resource, and you're not sitting in a car all day, and you get away from other people. But inside Yellowstone, the numbers of guides have gone like this too. And so have the numbers of tourists, of course. Now it happens these past 3 years, for obvious reasons. We had this year, just in the news a couple of days ago, how 2022 saw a dramatic decline in visitation in Yellowstone. It's down somewhere around 35%, if I remember right, 32, somewhere in that range. And that's partly because of the shutdown, partly because of the floods. All those things have a big impact. But yes, indeed, in the earlier years, I've been guiding for a long time, and I actually know people who had businesses guiding in the 90s who said, oh, too many people now, I'm not going there. I don't want to do it anymore. It's just too many people. So it was down around 3 million in the 90s, even less possibly in the late 90s, and then we hit 3 million right around well, as we know, we're pushing 4 million now, let's put it that way. So the visitation has increased dramatically. Being in Yellowstone and having those people stay to the roads actually provides a great opportunity. Issues, yes. More people getting in trouble, more people threatening the wildlife, more people being threatened themselves because of naivete, because they don't know, really don't understand the threats around them, whether it's from wildlife or traffic for that matter. But being in Yellowstone most of the people are confined to the roads, most of the guiding is done on the roads, and so to some extent the animals become accustomed to that. the road and the road shoulder becomes kind of a sacrifice area for that pristine nature experience, because you can't have that pristine nature experience when 30 motorcycles are going by on their way to, Sturgis bike rally. You still can get it by walking very, very short distances. I think what may happen in the future, and this does address your question, right now, in many cases, people can go pretty much anywhere they want in Yellowstone National Park, guides as well as the general tourists. At some point in time, I think that it's logical that that will be going on too much, and that the disturbance to the wildlife will be too great. We do have areas in Yellowstone right now where there's no off-trail travel. I think some of those areas I think we may have more areas similar to that. Did I answer your question?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I want to expand that question. Bear with me just a moment, Karen. I want to expand that question just a little bit. One of the things I would like to see, and this is difficult in relation to hunting, outside of the national parks, we pretty much hunt everything. All the landscapes get hunted, with the exception of some private landowners. Very often there are people who don't value hunting, and it becomes a refuge for wildlife. But those people often just shut the whole place down. I can't speak for everybody. I'm just speaking in generalities. But I would like to see places that are closer to our communities where we choose to not have hunting. And by doing that, this can be very controversial, by doing that, it's amazing how fast wildlife will respond. I would like opportunities for people to experience wildlife in a relatively pristine situation where the animals are not disturbed. So nobody's allowed into that area, and we have a good viewing situation. So in other words, a high ridge or a platform, a region roadside where, no more hunting in that particular region, in the view shed, so to speak. Everywhere you can see, there's not going to be any hunting. We can delineate that. And then that will be a place where pretty much kids, older folks, people who can't afford to go to Yellowstone, people who can't afford to hire a guide, would have that opportunity to experience wildlife in a more pristine situation. It's just something that's in the back of my mind, may not happen in my lifetime, but these resources are becoming more and more and more rare. We are not going to see a decline of desire to come. We may see restrictions on people coming. I do think that's likely to, I think we all agree, you can't keep increasing the numbers forever. And this year, and 2 years ago, because of COVID and because of the flood, we've actually seen restrictions on access. And I think in the future, I'm not going to say it's going to happen next year, I'm not going to say it's going to happen 10 years from now, but I know it's going to change somewhere along the way somehow. In the future, maybe the management agencies will take that as, we'll see an opportunity to restrict access by numbers as well. A lot of other national parks have done this in the American West, of course. Yellowstone and Grand Teton are kind of the exception. Yeah. Karen?
I just wanted to mention for our online viewers that they can use the Q&A if they have any questions.
Thank you, yeah. So if we have any online viewers that would like to ask a question, I think that would be great. Another question? Sure.
Well, just a comment. I'm recent transplant from Minnesota, okay?
Yep.
And in Minnesota for deer hunting, about the middle of the state south is a slug-only zone.
Yes.
Because it's so wide open, rifle bullets carry too far. And people will sit in a deer stand, but they'll also party hunt, where they'll go with a large group and drive the deer and have somebody at the end. And I'm not a deer hunter myself. I don't care for the taste of venison, so I don't shoot them. But I know some guys that are big into deer hunting. One group that always goes out party hunting all the time. And deer season opened up and saw this guy and said, "Aren't you out hunting with your party?" Well, they couldn't go hunting because this one friend of theirs couldn't make it, so he couldn't go. I said, "Well, what do you mean? There's 6 more of you." "No, why couldn't you go without him?" "Well, because he's colorblind. That's why we have to have him with." And I said, "What?" He said, "Well, yeah, he's colorblind, so the deer's natural camouflage doesn't work on him. He can spot deer that we can't find with binoculars." I'd never heard of that before. I never thought of that. I just thought it was kind of an interesting comment.
That is pretty interesting. I'm not sure I agree with it. Now that they may say that.
It doesn't make sense to me, but
Yeah,
they
I
say over
understand.
and over that he's the one, he can spot the deer, they know where to drive.
And spotting them is something else. So he may also, and maybe even he thinks it's because he's colorblind, because the other guys are so bad at it. But, because when you're drive hunting, when you're hunting it, I call that a drive.
Right.
So when you're drive hunting like that, you're intending to make that animal run.
Right.
And of course, whitetails flash their tails, and that's most of what they're hunting back there. Whenever we're spotting wildlife, we're always looking for the same three things: odd color, odd shape, or movement. And
Yep.
movement is the easiest thing to see. So in his case, he may be very skilled at putting all three of those together. The other guys may be being very casual about it, and they're, in a sense, they're relying on him. But while they're doing this, they're just not, he's watching for the details. I want to address that a little bit. Right off the bat, I noticed when I started guiding, I might take out a family, and maybe they're all from New York City, and grandma's there. And they're all living in the city, but grandma grew up on a farm. She's the one who spots the animals because she grew up with this.
Sure.
She developed that skill. She developed that attitude of watching for them in the first place and watching for that odd color, shape, and movement. So it really is, it is something that we can all develop for ourselves. I want to mention something else, just because you said you're a recent transplant, and I appreciate you admitting that. I recently took a class with the Montana Outdoor Science School in Bozeman. It was a natural history class. And I thought, you can learn from anybody. And I don't know everything, that's for sure. Sometimes I sound like I think I know everything, but I don't know everything. In any case, I take this natural history class, and there were 18 people in the class. 6 of them were recent arrivals from California.
Oh, interesting.
Every one of them apologized. But it gives you an idea of what's going on, I mean, there are people coming. And why are they coming? Well, wildlife is one of those things. The opportunity to hunt and fish is one of those things. The opportunity to have the open space, the landscape, the people. Which brings up another thought of mine. All of you are here. You've all been here for some period of time. Most of you have been, I'm sure, I suspect all of you have been to Yellowstone National Park. All of you have used our public lands. We're extremely lucky to have this. Of course, we really, really, truly are very lucky to have these resources for ourselves. It is very important that we that we continue to consider that these are our public lands, that we are part of. Not only what will happen in the future, but what will happen in the past and what's happening right now. We're all in the now. We're all here right now. This is the day that counts. This is the moment that counts. This is the second that counts. We are part of that cultural history from the past, carrying it into the future. We're part of it. Even if we aren't politically active, we are part of it. This is the community. We're the ones that are living here and using it, and people will, presumably, in one form or another, study us in the future. At least I hope they do. I hope they're going to be wondering whatever change comes along, they're going to be wondering how it happened. What were the people doing back then that led to where we are in the future? So that's the other aspect of all of this. Things change, things will be different in the future. Hunting is increasing a little bit. Commercial hunting, like I guide, is increasing a little bit. But wildlife watching is increasing dramatically. We can expect something like this to continue. For those of you who pay attention to the news, changes in regulation, changes in law, changes in political atmosphere, changes in the staffing of Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, our management agencies. These all have an impact on what's going to happen in the future. And as a result of that, it's going to change. I know it's going to change. There are issues associated with how we manage land today, how we divvy out permits, how we're going to manage wolves, how we're going to manage elk. These are big issues. How we're going to manage the Madison River. That happens to be a big one, very near and dear to my heart. These are big issues for localized people. We can expect more of that. So for those of you who are interested, of course, be involved with that. That's kind of the standard. And I would like to see, there is an organization, Yellowstone Wild Livelihoods. So it's a loose organization, but there is an effort today to get kind of some standards set for the wildlife watching industry. There are some efforts, and these are being done by nonprofits as well as concerned citizens, There is an effort to have schooling, to have classes, voluntary classes for hunting. I took the Master Hunter class 2 years ago. That's a program that's going on statewide right now. And there's one associated with fishing as well, for fishing guides. So I think we're going to see more of that in the future. It's very easy to be a guide, by the way. This is not rocket science. You just have to, in Yellowstone, you get insurance and you buy a car and you get a permit to do it. And it's relatively inexpensive, and bam, you're in business. Just hang out a shingle and start guiding. Hunting guiding, some hunting guides are very, very professional, some less so. Yeah, Diane, did you have a question?
Oh, no.
Time. Okay. Do we have any other questions right now? How are we doing on time?
I think we can have another question if anyone has one. Time to wrap up, perhaps, or a favorite final story?
Oh, I can tell you stories. There's no doubt about it. I'm trying to think of some of my favorites. There's been a lot of stories. I told you that grizzly bear story. I really didn't intend to tell you that one, but boy, I'll tell you, that puts the fear of God in you. It definitely makes you humble very quickly to know that something could go wrong really fast. When you're guiding hunters, of course, there's all kinds of safety issues. You're dealing with knives and firearms. People do make mistakes. Mistakes are not allowed in most situations. And as a guide, it's something that I have to really, truly stay on top of all the time. When it comes to wildlife watching, of course, there's all kinds of safety issues there, and all kinds of physical issues too. People stepping in hot springs, or falling into canyons, or falling out of the boat. But I just thought of a story that I think is one of the great funny stories. And I'll tell you several more just for the heck of it, but if you prompt me, it helps. There's a lot of wildlife guiding that I've done outside the park. This is not a big industry in the state of Montana. The vast majority of it happens inside Yellowstone. I took out this lady, one single woman, and this is in the early years of me doing this. And then back then, I was doing anything to make a buck, so I probably gave her a good price. She was only in town for a short time. We were going to do a half-day event, just to cruise up the Jefferson River beyond Three Forks, Montana, look at birds, look at wildlife, look at landscape, do a little cultural history kind of thing. She was from Great Britain, she was British, and she's sitting alongside me in my old 1988 Suburban. That was my first tour car. I've been doing this for a while. She's sitting alongside me in the Suburban. And we're driving up that highway that heads off towards the cutoff for Harrison, heads up towards Cardwell, following the Jefferson River. We're almost to the Jefferson River Canyon out by Lewis and Clark Caverns. When all of a sudden I see ahead of us, there's a cattle herd on the road. There's cows crossing the road, and we're driving up on the cows, and I'm thinking, oh man, they're kind of going in the same direction. This could go on for a long time. How am I going to get by this? I don't want to. There's like 3 guys on horseback, and they're moving the cows, and I don't know where the next gate is, and I don't want to mess them up. But I cruise up alongside the cows, and I'm on the pavement, and these guys start working the cows, and she's sitting alongside me, and she's asking questions like, so are these cowboys? And I said, it's about as close as you're going to get. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but she says, so these are real cowboys? Oh yeah, those are real cows too, And we're cruising up there, and I say, roll down your window. She rolls down the window. Cows are bawling, and now the poop is flopping in the wheel wells of the car. I'm hearing it slapping on up there. I got the scent, I got the sound, and these guys are, whoop, hey, ha, they're not popping whips or anything like that, but they're slapping the horses and they're slapping the ropes, and this one cow turns out, cuts to the right and starts heading back the other way, and this guy circles around, gets behind that cow, cow starts turning, and as he's doing this, the horse's butt goes like right in her window. The tail is just about, I could have grabbed that horse's tail if I reached past her. And this guy's yelling, and she's going, oh, 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 oh. And he starts riding away, gets the cow going in the right direction, and she says, thank you. Once in a lifetime. These are once in a lifetime experiences. You never know what's going to happen. I just thought that was so cool. And I'll guarantee you, she still remembers that. I wouldn't doubt it. I'm sure she remembered that to the end of her days. Did that inspire any other questions? I'll tell you another hunting story. So these are quick and dirty. I had to think about these because I knew I was going to do this, so I wanted to think about some other stories. There was this guy, and he'd hunted with me many, many times. He was an Eastern hunter. He would show up in his plaid jacket. We don't do that out here. And he's got the wool coat, and it's all in that red and green and red and green and red and black stripes and all this kind of stuff, and he had the pants to match, and got the Elmer Fudd orange hat with the flaps and stuff like that, And he was a young man, and he was in great shape. So I guided him quite a few years. He was always wearing that same stuff. Well, the next year he comes back and he's got these new fancy pants on. We're hiking in the mountains. And he's walking along behind me and you're hearing, shh, 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 shh. I said, you were better off with the wool on, Ed. What are you doing? And shh, shh. I'm sorry, Ken. I don't know what to do. I said, man, we're not going to get anywhere. We should just sit down. He says, no. I'll take him off. Take him off. Takes off his pants. He's hunting in his green long john. I have to admit, I didn't even want to be seen with this guy. It was just, he did okay, but he was laughing about it. But it was definitely kind of odd. He's in his long, well, let's just sit in the snow, you know. It didn't work out real well that way. You know? Anyway, that was a quick one. I could probably think, I'll tell you another one. Do we still have time?
One more story.
Okay, one more story. So at least I'm working out to the end of the hour. See that? I'm going to fill this thing. So one more story. I got to remember which story it was because I had it in my mind a moment ago. I go a little too fast for myself sometimes. Let's see, one more, oh, darn it. Oh, yes. So I'd taken out the Cohen family for many, many years. Margaret's a French literature professor at Stanford. I took out her 2 boys. These people literally have come into the field with me probably 20 years. I mean, I've watched the boys grow up. They're in a sense, we're family now. But we're out there, we're in Yellowstone again. We're in the Tower area where there happens to be lots and lots of black bears. And this is an animal behavior story. And lo and behold, we're driving down the road, and here comes this black bear. It's foraging alongside the road. It's right outside the window. You know, the bear is foraging along the road. I'm maneuvering the car so they get a good view. They can take their pictures. We can all watch what's going on. The bear crosses behind the car, comes up the other side. It's just right on the shoulder of the road, just grazing away. And Margaret says, that looks like a little bear. I said, well, you know, it's not really that little. It's not a huge bear, but it's an adult bear. You know, it's round. It's a little hard to judge size. It's not a tiny bear. And the bear's just biting off dandelions. I mean, it looks as cute and calm as can be. And then the cars start stacking up, and of course it takes off across the sagebrush, and it's just walking out there, continuing to forage. Beyond it, I see a pronghorn doe. Now this is in the spring, and I see this pronghorn doe, and she's by herself. And I said, guys, that doe is out there, and she may have some fawns hidden here. Oh, really? What does that mean? I said, that bear might be hunting fawns. It might shift into hunting pronghorn fawns right now. And Margaret says, well, what would it do if it was hunting fawns? And right as I'm about to say something, all of a sudden that bear, right into the sagebrush, it's up with a pronghorn fawn in its mouth. Oh. I mean, and it's a sad, tough thing to see. But the fact of the matter is it happens on a regular basis. And she probably had 2 fawns, so hopefully she still had another fawn. But right off the bat, the cute little bear that's right outside your car becomes a predator. And it's not messing around. It can change mood very quickly, change its maneuvering very, very quickly. And I've got other stories like that too, but you're going to have to catch me in the field someday to get those. Well, that's about it. Thank you all very much. I appreciate your attention and I appreciate your time. Thanks for listening to the stories. Karen told me you probably wanted to hear stories, so I kind of stacked them up in my brain.
Thank you.